There is an epidemic happening in men today. Weakness and comfort has taken place of strength and purpose. Masculinity is labeled as toxic, and women are now the ones who define what a man is more than men are. Weak fathers are raising lost boys who are at risk of never being initiated into manhood. We've grown farther and farther from God, which led us to become weaker and weaker. The man within fights back by introducing men to their true strength and purpose through God. So join me, and together we can restore true strength and purpose in men. Hello, and welcome back to the Man Within podcast. So happy to have you here with us today. Today, I wanted to talk about something that's really dangerous, something that's really detrimental, something that's really damaging to our men and our boys in today's society. And that topic is men and boys should just be avoiding risk. You shouldn't go after your dreams. You shouldn't be chasing your purpose. It's just much too risky. Well, guys, listen, there are a lot of lies that men have been taught, especially in our current generation. As we get weaker, as we get softer, as masculinity becomes more and more a thing of a past, as masculinity becomes more and more of a thing that's demonized. Well, guys, these lies are unnatural, and they lead to detrimental consequences. Consequences I've experienced in my own life, like emptiness, depression, lack of purpose, just a feeling of overall apathy and meaninglessness, just to name a few. But things that happen when you fight your human nature. The thing about your human nature is that you can fight it as hard as you want. Doesn't matter. It'll always end up winning, because that is a fight you cannot win. And guys, if we're being honest, human nature isn't something you should be fighting. It isn't something you want to fight. It isn't something you want to beat, because it is a gift from God. We are men, and we were created in God's image. Our masculinity, our human nature is a gift from God. Being here alive today, having a purpose crafted for us by God, that is all a gift. Human nature isn't something you should want to fight, and it's not a fight that you can win. It may not always feel like a gift, but God put us here for a very specific reason. He created us a very specific way for a specific reason. And after being fed lies for years, which led me to fight my own masculinity and led me to get my own ungodly consequences, I figured out that there are some fights that just cannot be won. The inner man always wanted to come out, and despite the voices that tell us we shouldn't act like men, I went ahead and did it anyways. I figured that if you can't beat human nature, the best thing to do is learn to live with it and learn how to use it to your own advantage. And let me tell you, learning how to tap into masculine energy is the best thing you will ever do as a man. But in order to do that, you must be willing to take risks. The lie I want to talk about today is the lie that it's too risky. It's too risky to live life on your own terms. It's too risky to pursue the calling in your heart, when in fact, the riskiest thing you can do is avoid it altogether. We were all born with a unique calling and a unique purpose given to us by God. Ephesians 2:10 tells us that God crafted us. He planned out all of our steps. He planned out the purpose for us way before we were even born. He needed us for his will. I mean, I think that's an incredible gift. The God of the universe needed you. You serve his purpose. If God himself has given us a unique purpose and we actively avoid it, don't be surprised when you suffer serious consequences. I mean, you can go on ignoring reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. That's a great quote that I use a lot. That's by Ayn Rand. So as a man, when you avoid your purpose because you think it's too risky, you're not just denying God, but you're denying your human nature. I mean, it's one thing to fight your own human nature, but it's another to try to fight God. Well, the thing is, they go hand in hand, because even though we're human, we were created in God's image, and he put everything together perfectly as he does. So you try to fight yourself, you're fighting God. It's just not going to lead you down a road that you want to be on. So despite the lies that men and boys are being taught today about avoiding risks, avoiding danger, staying in your comfort zone. Just do what you're told. Go be a good little sheep. Do what everyone else is doing. Instead of all of that, men need risk in order to grow. That is what we need. It's part of how we were created. It's part of our instincts. Men grow through challenges and risk because they need something to overcome. One of the components of a challenge is that there needs to be some risk of failure. If there wasn't any risk of failure, then there'd be no challenge. There wouldn't be anything to overcome. There needs to be a possibility of failure. That's where risk comes in. They need to prove their capabilities and see it physically. As men, we operate in the physical world. That's why men, we like to use our hands. We like to get dirty. We like to test our strength and we like to compete. That's why we compete in physical sports and combat sports. We really want to test our own capabilities as men, to test our own strength in the physical realm. That's how we were created. That's our instinct. There's a very good reason for that, and it's a very good thing. I'm going to tell you why right now. Men grow through challenge, but women grow through preservation. Femininity is a naturally soft and nurturing trait, and it's something that should be saved. It's just something that should be ultimately preserved. It's such an amazing thing. When a radiant feminine woman walks in a room, she can lift everyone up. And I'm telling you right now, men, you come home to a radiant feminine woman. And women, if you're listening to this too, your femininity is such a gift. It's so powerful. Just being around a feminine woman in her radiance and her presence, I mean, you can motivate a man to move a mountain. It's such a beautiful thing. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to get off track, but ladies, I'm so sorry that what our society, what feminism has told you today. I am so sorry that they've told you to be stripped of your most powerful, beautiful thing, which is your femininity. And I'm sorry to the men that have been told that masculinity is demonized. And I'm sorry that this is all leading us away from our human nature and ultimately from God. I'm so sorry that we've come to this. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why I'm trying to help build strong men to fight for what's right, which is ultimately the essence of masculinity. So, but men instinctively want to do all the tough and dangerous work so that women don't have to. So their beauty and their femininity can be preserved. This isn't a form of oppression, as our society today would like to have you believe. It's the complete opposite. It's a part of a man's human nature that was given to him by God. God gave men women to be helpers of men, and it is our job to protect her. We each have different strengths, but let me just summarize it this way. A man provides for a woman physically, and a woman provides for a man emotionally. For whatever reason, well, for God's reason, if we're to be the leaders and the protectors and providers, we got to have a strength somewhere. Well, that strength is in the physical realm. That's why we excel in physical feats. Likewise, women tend to excel emotionally. They understand their emotions better. And there's studies that have been shown that women tend to excel in the classroom as well. So they tend to be a little more book smart and men tend to be a little bit more street smart. And I'm going to make a whole series about the difference of men and women, but today we're just sticking with men. Taking on risk and challenge is how we as men push ourselves to the next level. But today we live in such a soft society that strong men, conveniently built for us, that there doesn't seem to be much need for strong men. We have everything we need. We've got our Netflix, we've got our potato chips, we have running water, we've got plumbing, electricity, Wi-Fi. You've got everything you could possibly imagine to make us comfortable. And I'm not saying that, it's a bad thing that we've gotten to where we're at. It's amazing. It's miraculous. feat of will and engineering and strength. But the problem with all of this is that when you get rid of all the strong men, when you put all of the men in a comfort zone and you encourage them to stay in their comfort zone, what happens is you as a society put yourself in a position where you now need strong men. And that's where we're at. All you have to do is look around and see the strong men are still very much needed. Look at the corruption in our own country. Look at the wars around the world. Look at the lack of strong, godly men. Every time I go online, there's always a new video about women complaining there aren't any strong men left. Well, to be honest with you, they're kind of right. And I know that's not fun to hear, men, but we got to step up. If our job's to be a leader and a provider and a protector, that's a tough job. You got to be tough. I know it's not easy. Trust me. I had to go through this. I had my own journey that I went through. I'm still going through it. I'm still learning things. But if God designed us to be strong, then you be strong. You be strong, or you will suffer the consequences. So, men, I just want to give you a little bit of encouragement today when it comes to risk. I know that it's a scary thing. I know that it's something that generally we want to avoid, and we've been told to avoid it. But as I've just gone through, it's part of our human nature. We need it in order to grow. Men grow through challenge. So I'm just going to walk through risk a little bit and help you understand why it's a healthy thing and why you need it. Well, the world likes to define risk as the probability of loss. When put that way, of course, your first thought is going to be, well, I don't want any probability of loss. Therefore, you avoid the risk altogether, so you don't have to face any discomfort, or you don't have to face any failure. Well, let me go ahead and dispel that lie for you right now. The dictionary definition, not the society definition, the actual dictionary definition of risk is actually defined as the effect that uncertainty has on objectives. You don't realize it, but every single decision you've ever made has had some risk. There's not 100% certainty that you won't get in an accident when you drive your car. There's not 100% certainty that you won't burn your dinner. There's not 100% certainty that your job will still be there waiting for you tomorrow. The thing is, you will never, ever be able to fully eliminate risk, but you can minimize it. The only way to minimize risk is to minimize the uncertainty. Remember the effect that uncertainty has on an objective. Dictionary definition. Here's what I mean by this. The first time you try something, there's a lot of uncertainty because you haven't seen what's on the other side. For example, if you wanted to try a new sport, like let's just say jujitsu, which I highly recommend you get into. But if you want to try a new sport like jujitsu and you were afraid of getting hurt, you'd view it as very risky. It's not until after you tried it that you realize it's not as painful and it's not as scary as you originally thought. You're able to do it a lot better than you thought you could. And the instructors are actually very understanding and they're very willing to help you. But you wouldn't have known any of that if you had not built up the courage to take that first risk. Risk is riskiest the first time you do something. So when you try it the second time, you have a better idea how to move your body, how to protect yourself, how to navigate. And by the 10th time, you don't even realize that the risk is there. For example, just like every time you stand up to walk across the room, you don't realize there's always a risk of falling. You could lose your balance, but you don't care because you've done it a million times and you know even if you do fall, you can get right back up. So let me give you my definition of risk. Risk is the price you pay for life. Not just being alive, but a life worth living. And men, it is our human nature. For us to live naturally as men, we have to take on risk. Without it, life is going to feel empty. It's going to feel meaningless. Just like the place that I was in. I had a lack of purpose because I was avoiding the purpose because I was avoiding risk. So risk is the price you pay for life. One of the requirements for anything, anything of value is little risk, a little discomfort, a little pain, a little sacrifice. Well, you're sacrificing your comfort every time you step out of your comfort zone and take on a little bit of risk. But as men, that's what we need, and that's how we grow. So the greater the reward, meaning something that separates you more from the average, the greater the reward, the greater the risk required. That's why there's so few people have such great things. That's what separates the average from the great, is the greats were willing to do the riskiest things. And many have failed. And even those at the top, I'm telling you, they failed. What makes them great is that they failed more times than more people are willing to do. They've failed more times than most people are willing. They were willing to take more risk more often than most people. And that's what separates them from average. And men, I'm telling you today, you weren't designed to be average. It's part of our human nature to take those risks. If you want to be different, if you want to be above average, the only thing you have to do is something different. Be willing to take those risks. Do something different. You can do it. Pursue that purpose. Find God. God gave us a spirit of strength. He gave us a warrior spirit. A warrior spirit isn't something that backs down when things get tough. A warrior doesn't back down from a battle. No, a warrior stands up and says, I don't care what it's going to take. I'm going to break through that barrier, break through that obstacle, and make sure I end up on the other side. That's the spirit of a man. That's the spirit of a man that God gave us. And in order to do that, you need to be willing to take risks. The other thing I want you to think about is that the goal itself is not risky. The path is risky. Is it risky to want to live the life of your dreams and fulfill your calling, to fulfill that purpose? Is it risky to want a fulfilling life instead of a monotonous one that just makes you more and more miserable day in and day out? Is it risky to want to start a family? I mean, I'd argue that you'd have to be crazy not to want those things. What if there was a way to get all of those things and you didn't take advantage of it? The absolute craziest thing to me is wanting something different and knowing exactly how to get there, yet doing the opposite, doing everything in your power to avoid getting the things that you want. That's like saying you want to live someone else's dreams. Wake up and live the same day over and over until life has absolutely no meaning, has no purpose, to live alone for the rest of your days. If this sounds crazy to you, I want you to stop and take a second to reflect on what you've been letting yourself believe. Think about these questions. Ask yourself this question. After you listen to this, ask yourself these questions and think about it deeply. Will doing the things that are meaningful to me really bring me success? Or will doing the things that aren't meaningful to me bring me success? Is doing what God called me to do, what God designed me to do, is that worth it? Or is doing something that God didn't call me to do worth it? Is it worth it for me to just avoid God's calling, the whole purpose I'm on this earth that God called me to do? Is it really worth it for me to avoid that and follow the ways of the world? Which one's worse? Whether you do or don't do, one thing is for sure. There's going to be risk involved. The biggest risk in life is not taking any. And one of the biggest risks you will ever do, actually, I'm sorry, let me rephrase it like this. The biggest risk you will ever take is completely rejecting God, rejecting his will, rejecting what it is he put you on this earth to accomplish. That's the biggest risk. And then when you are avoiding taking risks, you are rejecting that human nature, and you, by doing that, are rejecting God. That's the truth. I know it because I lived it. I had a meaningless life. It was empty. I had no purpose. I didn't know who I was. And I was living in that comfort zone. I lived in that household. I've grew up in that society where, a man's purpose is only to please women and stay inside of your comfort zone and do as you're told and follow orders. And, God is there, but who cares what God has to say? Guys, I lived that life. I know the detriment of it. I felt the meaninglessness. I felt the lack of purpose. I felt emasculated for years. I didn't know how to talk to women. I didn't know how to love myself. I didn't know how to treat others. But men, after finding God, after, first of all, after finding the definition of men, a lot of that changed. After finding God, all of it changed. Man, you want to get in touch with your human nature? You find God. You find a definition of masculinity through God. You ask God. I'm telling you. So I'm going to close this out with this. Your soul does not belong to you, and it certainly does not belong to the world. Your soul does not belong to you. It does not belong to the world. It only belongs to God. The goal of avoiding risks altogether, that comfort that you get from avoiding risks, that is an illusion. There is only one way to find comfort, and that is through God. It's not by avoiding risks. Your soul belongs to God, and if you're alive, you're going to suffer. God's formula is temporary pain for long-term pleasure. Well, guys, this earth, this life that we're living, this is the temporary suffering. There's a lot of beautiful, amazing things that will and can happen in this life, especially if you have strong faith in God. But as long as you are alive on the earth, remember, we're in this earth, but we're not of it. This is suffering. What we're doing is we're preparing ourselves for the eternal. And the only way to find true peace, comfort, and joy is through God. Luckily, you get to choose. It's part of our free will. We get to choose whether or not to take on that risk, whether or not to accept God, and whether or not to completely and fully step into that calling. So I hope this message has helped you understand what actually is right. And a quick tip just to leave you guys on is if it seems crazy to the world, it's probably right. If the world says it's good, it's probably wrong. God doesn't operate the same way we do. He can open doors that we don't see and make the impossible possible. And don't be afraid because God will take care of everything. When you take that step outside of the comfort zone, when you take that risk, Proverbs 16:3 says, commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. So take that risk, pursue your purpose, and whatever you do, make sure that you are putting God above all things. So thank you guys so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Man Within podcast. If you gained any value from it at all, please just like, comment, subscribe, put another topic down in the comments to let me know what more you want to hear. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. And as always, I will see you on the next one.